Holy look up.
Oh my God. Oh.
They got red.
That is
Wow,
so...
look at the flash.
That is beautiful.
Oh my God.
$20,000 in gold, pulled from the dirt in just 7 days. Sheryl and Simon didn't stumble on a lucky nugget. They unleashed a gold rush of their own. From the first beep of the detector to the last fist-sized chunk, the Outback floor glittered under their shovels. Rivals watched in disbelief. Camps whispered their names. And with every nugget tossed into their jar, the number climbed higher. $5,000, $10,000, until the final count hit a jaw-dropping $20,000 fortune. This wasn't luck. This was raw grit, relentless digging, and the kind of strike that turns ordinary hunters into legends overnight. The Australian outback stretched like an endless furnace, red earth shimmering under a punishing sun. Nothing moved out here, not even the wind. It was the kind of land that swallowed dreams whole. Yet it was here, in this forgotten patch of Western Australia, that Sheryl and Simon rolled the dice of their lives. Locals had long written off this ridge as dead ground. No serious gold hunter had pulled a nugget here in years. Most had moved on, calling it cursed dirt, a graveyard for broken detectors and empty wallets. But Sheryl and Simon weren't here to play safe. They were here to prove everyone wrong. With their week's fuel and food money tied up in this one desperate gamble, every coil sweep, every footstep in the dust carried the weight of survival. Simon adjusted his hat, scanning the barren horizon, and muttered under his breath, "One good nugget could change everything." The cameras caught it all, the sweat, the silence, the madness of chasing gold where no one believed it remained. And under the blaze of the Outback sun, the gamble began. For Sheryl, it wasn't just blind hope. It was memory. She carried with her a crumpled set of diary pages she'd found in a local market years earlier. The faded ink belonged to miners from the 1930s, men who once pitched their tents on this very ridge. Their words hinted at miracles. Sun nuggets, they called them. Chunks of gold revealed after fierce storms scoured the ground clean. But there were no official records, no assay maps, no government stamps to prove it. Just whispers of campfire legends passed down through time like ghost stories. Many dismissed them as drunken tales of men who saw riches where there were none. But Sheryl believed. She had to. Simon was more cautious, but even he couldn't shake the lure of those words. "Sun nuggets," he repeated with a skeptical grin as he switched on his detector. The machine crackled to life, a strange hymn rising from its coils. Each sweep hummed like a tuning fork, listening for echoes from the past, for a spark of truth buried in the dust. The ground answered back with static false alarms, the cruel taunt of mineralized soil. Hours passed, the heat pressing down, their water bottles growing lighter with every sip. Still, they pushed on, chasing the ghosts of history with stubborn grit. Then suddenly, the silence shattered. A sharp ping pierced the static, clear and undeniable. Both froze, glancing at each other with wide eyes. This wasn't background noise. This was real. Simon dropped to his knees, clawing at the red earth with a prospector's desperation. Sweat dripped from his forehead, staining the dirt as he dug deeper, fingers brushing against something solid. His breath caught. With a final scoop, he pulled free a rough, thumb-sized nugget, its yellow glow unmistakable against the blood-red soil. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The nugget felt impossibly heavy in his hand, dense with promise. On the field scale, it tipped toward a number that made his heart hammer. nearly $2,000 in one find. Sheryl gasped, then burst into laughter that cracked through the Outback silence. "Looks like the ghosts were right," she said, her eyes gleaming with vindication. The diary pages hadn't lied. The land wasn't dead. It was alive with secrets waiting to be claimed. And just like that, the dusty gamble transformed into a hunt. If one nugget lay waiting, how many more still slept beneath their boots? Smash that like button and subscribe right now, because this is only the beginning of Sheryl and Simon's unbelievable strike, and what happens next will push them to the edge of legend. The detectives began to falter, their tones thinning into weak static as the last bars of battery drained away. Simon cursed under his breath, tapping the machine as though sheer will might squeeze a few more hours from it. The fuel drums weren't faring much better. Barely a third remained, and every kilometer back to town would cost them dearly. 6 days. That was all they had before food, fuel, and power would run out. Sheryl felt the pressure like a hand tightening around her throat. Every sweep of the coil wasn't just a search for gold anymore. It was a countdown to disaster. The land itself seemed to fight them. Flies swarmed in thick black clouds, crawling into their mouths, stinging their eyes. The heat pressed down, like a hammer, pushing their bodies toward collapse. Dust clung to their clothes, caking in every crease of skin. Each step into the endless red earth felt heavier than the last, as though the ridge didn't want to surrender its secrets. But then, hope pierced through the torment. Not once, but twice, the detectives sang again, clear, sharp tones cutting through the static. Simon and Sheryl locked eyes, exhaustion forgotten, hearts thundering. They dropped to their knees, digging feverishly into the hard ground, and within hours they unearthed 2 solid chunks of gold, one the size of a walnut, the other flat and thin like a golden leaf. The spark was back. The ridge wasn't finished with them yet. By the 3rd day, fortune tilted in their favor. They stumbled into what every prospector dreams of, but few ever find: a scatter patch. Sheryl's coil shrieked as it passed over one target, then another and another. They marked the ground with stones, each signal like a beacon of buried wealth. When they dug, the earth rewarded them with glittering teeth of gold, 6 nuggets in total, each small but pure. Sheryl scooped them into her palm, dirt falling away to reveal their glow. She held them up to the fading sunlight, her voice soft, almost reverent. "That's rent, food, and fuel covered." Relief washed through Simon like cool water. Their tally now sat above $7,500, enough to turn survival into strategy. But the Outback has no secrets for long. Word traveled fast through the network of camps and pubs, faster still through whispers traded over static-filled radios. Rival hunters began to circle like hawks, their vehicles appearing on ridges at sunset, headlights burning in the distance. Their presence was a silent warning. Fortune draws not just admiration, but envy. Sheryl and Simon worked with their backs to the horizon now, never turning away from the holes they dug, every sound in the wind a threat. It was no longer just a hunt for gold, it was a fight to keep it. As the 5th night fell, the sky itself turned against them. Clouds boiled in from the west, swollen and black, dragging thunder across the horizon. The storm arrived like a war drum, sheets of rain hammering the iron-rich ground until it bled red mud. The Outback became a floodplain, rivulets carving through their diggings, the camp sagging under waterlogged tarps. But Sheryl wasn't afraid. She remembered the miners' notes. The storms were part of the legend. The sun nuggets rose when the heavens cracked open, washed free from shallow beds, left naked in the clay. At dawn, Steam rose from the land, a ghostly mist curling above the scarred ridge. They switched on the detectors, expecting static, interference, chaos. Instead, the machines screamed. The wet ground, rich with iron stone, lit up with signal after signal, so many they couldn't tell where to dig first. Simon dropped into the mud, his shovel sinking into the softened earth. Sheryl followed, their boots disappearing into pools of ochre sludge. Within minutes, Simon's hands closed around something heavy. He pulled it free, rainwater dripping from its surface, and both of them gasped. It was no tiny scatterpiece, no flake or sliver. This was a slab, chunky and gleaming, veins of gold running like rivers through its stone. On the scale, it crashed past $5,000 in value. Simon's voice cracked, a whisper more than a shout, as if the storm still demanded reverence. We just broke $10,000. And in that moment, drenched in mud and lightning, they knew the ridge wasn't dead at all. It was waking up, and they had only begun to stir its fury. But gold never stays secret for long. Word of fresh cuts, or perhaps the gleam itself, carried across the valley faster than they realized. The red trucks appeared on the horizon without warning, dust plumes slicing the ridge like smoke from a fire. Two of them parked with precision, barely 200 meters away, engines idling before falling silent. Sheryl felt her stomach clench as the doors swung open. Rival prospectors, lean, hard men in wide-brimmed hats, stood watching, arms crossed, scanning the ground with eyes trained to spot fresh diggings. Out here, ownership was blurred, and everyone knew disputes could spiral from words to fists to worse. Simon kept his gaze fixed on the coil, pretending not to notice, but his shoulders tensed with every step. Sheryl whispered sharply, "Don't say a word. Don't show a thing." But she knew it was already too late. The sparkle in their eyes, the exhaustion on their faces, the subtle joy they hadn't been able to mask since yesterday's storm find, it all betrayed them. Gold changes the way people carry themselves, and rivals could smell success like vultures smell blood. From then on, silence became their shield. Radios muted, voices dropped to a murmur. Every signal they dug, every shovelful of dirt, was handled with the stealth of thieves. They piled their finds in concealed tins, burying them under gear, hiding wealth in the plainest of containers. At night, they took turns sitting awake by the fire. Rifles leaned casually against their chairs, the glow of the red trucks still visible on the distant ridge. The Outback had shifted. No longer empty, no longer safe. Now it was a chessboard, and every move had to be calculated. The next blow didn't come from rivals, but from the land itself. The sun returned with a vengeance, stripping away the brief, cool mercy the storm had given them. By mid-morning, the air shimmered with heat waves, the thermometer spiking past 40 degrees Celsius. The ground burned beneath their boots. Tools grew too hot to grip without gloves, and the flies multiplied into a black cloud that seemed determined to drive them mad. Their water jugs dwindled, each sip carefully rationed, every liter a countdown to retreat. Simon's face turned pale beneath the layers of dust, his movements sluggish and clumsy. Then, without warning, he dropped, his knees buckled, shovel clattering to the ground, his body folding into the dirt. Sheryl rushed to his side, panic clawing at her throat. His pulse hammered wildly, skin hot as iron, heat exhaustion. She dragged him beneath the shade of their canopy, forcing him to drink the last of one bottle. He groaned, eyes half shut, muttering about the gold slipping away, while they wasted precious hours. "Rest, or you'll die out here," she snapped, though she felt the same ache. Every minute away from the detectors was a fortune lost. The dream of a $20,000 week seemed to drift out of reach, stolen by the sun, swallowed by the cruel land. But fate had a twisted sense of timing. Just as despair set in, Sheryl swung her coil over a patch of hardpan, no different from the hundreds they'd crossed before. The machine erupted with a scream so loud it made her heart leap into her throat. Simon staggered up at the sound, swaying but alive with sudden adrenaline. They dug together, tearing at the earth, each shovelful harder, deeper until the soil gave way around something massive. Simon's hands hit stone. No, not stone. A weight that pulsed differently, heavier, as though the earth itself resisted giving it up. When they dragged it into daylight, both froze. It was the size of a football, rough and misshapen, streaked with ironstone. But through the crust gleamed unmistakable veins of gold, fat and bright as sunlight itself. They didn't breathe for a full 10 seconds, the reality too immense to process. This wasn't just another nugget. This was a monster, the kind of find prospectors told stories about for years. Sheryl's hands trembled as they set it onto the field scale, both of them leaning in as the needle swung. Nearly $7,000. One rock, worth more than all the scatterpatches and storm nuggets combined. Simon laughed, the sound cracked and raw, disbelief pouring out in gasps. Sheryl clutched the lump of gold to her chest, kissing its rough surface like a holy relic. "The Kingmaker," she whispered, eyes blazing. "This one changes everything." In that instant, exhaustion, hunger, and fear all melted away. The tally leapt past 18,000, so close to their impossible dream they could taste it. They had pulled life from the land's grip, forced a miracle out of cursed ground, and the ridge, reluctant, brutal, unforgiving, had given them their crown jewel. Yet deep down, Sheryl knew this wasn't the end. The land had tested them with heat, storms, and silence, but it hadn't finished its trial. If the ridge had surrendered this much gold, what else still slept in its belly? And how far would they have to push themselves to claim it before someone else decided the prize was theirs? That answer came sooner than either expected. By late afternoon, the rival prospectors closed the distance, walking straight into camp with the kind of casual swagger that carried hidden menace. Their questions came wrapped in fake politeness. "How's the ground treating you? What's the wait so far? Funny seeing you working this ridge no one touches anymore." Each word was a probe, digging for cracks. Simon's jaw clenched, hands never straying far from the shovel stuck upright in the dirt. But it was Sheryl who answered, her voice even and sharp. She laughed off the questions, tossing them red herrings about digging nothing but old iron scrap and bottle tops. "Whole lot of junk, that's all," she said, waving her hand at the scattered trash pile they'd carefully planted for this very bluff. But she could feel their eyes scanning the camp, lingering too long on the covered gear, the faint excitement that still clung to their expressions like a shadow. Behind her, Simon moved quietly, lifting the jerry can that looked like nothing more than fuel storage and sliding it beneath a tangle of tarps and rusted tools. Inside that can, wrapped in cloth, lay the monster nugget, the scatter patch, every ounce of gold that now defined their future. The rivals stood in silence long enough to make the air itself tighten. Their hands hung loose at their sides, but too close to picks and crowbars to feel safe. Sheryl forced herself to smile, though sweat stung her eyes. Eventually, with a smirk that promised this wasn't finished, the strangers turned back toward their trucks. Engines roared to life, headlights flashing once as they drove away. That night, trust in silence was gone. They posted themselves as guards, sitting opposite sides of the fire, rifles within easy reach, the flames painting long shadows across the camp. Every crack in the scrub, every whisper of wind set nerves alight. The Outback was no longer just land. It was a battlefield, and the gold was the prize. Morning brought no peace, only urgency. Supplies were almost gone, the week nearly spent, but something in both of them refused to leave empty ground. They had clawed their way this far. One more chance could be the difference between survival and legend. The detectors, battered and fading, gave them one last clear, sharp scream. Both of them froze, adrenaline surging. Simon dropped to his knees with a shovel, tearing at the earth as if his life depended on it. Dirt flew, sweat streaked his face, and then the shovel struck something hard. He dug with his hands, ripping free a nugget that filled his palm completely. Not massive, not another kingmaker, but solid, dense, and pure. When it hit the field scale, the numbers glowed. $2,200. That was the one that pushed them over the line. Their tally surged past 20,000, landing on 20,200 in total. The dream number, the target that had seemed impossible only days earlier, now sat in their hands as reality. Sheryl fell backward into the dust, laughing, the sound hoarse and wild. Simon joined her, collapsing in exhaustion beside the shovel, both of them staring at the burning sky. They laughed until the sound turned to coughing, until the adrenaline drained from their bodies and left only disbelief. A week of blood, storms, heat, and rivals had given them more than many families earned in half a year. By the time they staggered into town, their names had already traveled ahead of them. Word of their strike spread through pubs, across campfires, whispered on crackling radios. Rivals who had doubted them now spoke their names with grudging respect, some with jealousy so thick it dripped like venom. In every mining camp from Kalgoorlie to Leonora, Sheryl and Simon became the story of the season. The couple who turned dead ground into gold, who pulled 20 grand from a cursed ridge in just 7 days. Some said it was pure luck, the kind of chance find that could never be repeated. Others swore they must have uncovered a forgotten prospector's map, a secret left, buried in those 1930s diary pages. A few muttered darker things, that no one finds that much gold without giving something back to the land. But in the pubs, when beer spilled and the stories grew taller, Sheryl and Simon were spoken of with awe. They had joined the line of legends, their $20,000 week etched into Outback folklore. And as cameras caught them one last time, dust still clinging to their boots, Sheryl turned to Simon with fire in her eyes. "Next time," she said, her voice low but unshakable, "we go bigger."